curse of the old house. No one in the small town of Lakeston dared even approach the old house on the outskirts. There were ominous rumors about him. The locals said that the house was cursed. Over the decades, it began to become covered with rust and mold, overgrown with a web of dark stories, each of which instilled real fear. They said that people were disappearing there. Others claimed to have seen glowing windows at night and vague shadows inside. But everyone knew one thing: no one returned from there the same. At the center of this grim action was Eric, a young, ambitious journalist from a large city who came to Lakeston in search of sensational material. He was attracted to mysteries and everything related to the paranormal. Eric was determined, believing that the rumors about curses were just the inventions of local superstitious residents. He decided that he would go to the house at night, armed with a camera and a notebook, to prove that there was nothing there but ruins. As he entered, he immediately felt a strange feeling of depression, as if someone was watching him from dark corners. There was a dusty silence in the old rooms, broken only by his own breathing and the occasional creak of old boards underfoot. Climbing the stairs to the second floor, Eric found an abandoned nursery. A crib with rusty bars stood in the middle of the room, and faded toys were scattered around, as if someone had left them in a hurry. As soon as he took a step inside, he suddenly felt a strong smell of rotten earth that hit his nose. Suddenly, the door of the old closet creaked, as if it had opened by itself, revealing an emptiness inside. But when Eric looked closer, he noticed a small mirror fragment on the bottom shelf. He instinctively picked it up and felt a slight stab of pain in his finger. Blood dripped onto the shard, and suddenly the whole house around him seemed alive. The walls seemed to shake, and muffled children's whispers began to come from the corners. Eric decided to leave, but when he turned around, he found that the door was tightly locked. He felt a voice in his head, low and rustling like an old wind, whispering to him in an unknown language. Eric rushed to the window, but instead of the dark night behind the glass, he saw strange, distorted faces stuck to the glass. They seemed angry and hungry. Their eyes were empty, and their mouths were wide open, as if in a scream. Having barely escaped from this room, he began to run down the stairs, but the faster he walked, the longer the corridor seemed. Suddenly he realized that he could not leave the house. It was as if he was trapped in the space between reality and some other unknown world. Eric realized that this house was not just a ruin. He was full of mysterious, invisible entities that lived on the edge of his perception, luring him into their dark corners. Trying to find a way out, he came across an old notebook lying on the floor in one of the rooms. On the first page, written in an almost illegible handwriting, there was one word: oblivion. He didn't want to continue reading, but something made him open the next page. The notebook talked about a family who lived here in the middle of the last century, and about a terrible disease that suddenly overtook all family members. Their voices, their faces, everything that belonged to them in life was locked up within these walls. They begged for help, but no one heard them. Now the house was their curse, and everyone who entered it fell into their power. Eric noticed that the letters on the page began to change shape in a strange way, as if the living notebook was also part of the curse. He felt his own thoughts getting heavier, as if someone else's will had invaded them. He could hear someone calling his name. The voice was like a child's, penetrating his consciousness like a song that could not be put out of his head. Eric felt more and more like a part of home by the minute. His hands became as cold as marble, and it seemed that shadows were reaching out from the walls, as if trying to grab him. He realized that if he couldn't get out now, he would stay here forever, like those who came before him. At some point, Eric realized that he had been in the house for not a minute, not an hour, but perhaps an eternity. The watch on his wrist had stopped, and trying to remember what day it was only caused an eerie feeling of emptiness. The voices in the house were getting louder, as if they were getting closer. They were no longer chaotic whispers, but formed into distinct words. They were calling him. They called me home. Trying to fight the growing feeling of fear, Eric reminded himself that all this was an illusion, a game of consciousness caused by fatigue and darkness. He looked around the room he found himself in, trying to focus on reality. Old wallpaper covered with black spots, heavy, dusty curtains that hid the only window, and a painting hanging over the fireplace. This painting was the only element not covered by dust and time. It depicted a family scene. A man and a woman were sitting in armchairs, and in front of them stood a girl of about 5 with a doll in her hands. Looking closer, Eric noticed something strange. The eyes in the portrait were too lively. He caught them slowly, watching his every move. His heart began to beat faster, and he had a strange feeling that the portrait was not just an image. It was a door, maybe even a way out. Overcoming his fear, he stepped closer and touched the cold, slightly damp surface of the canvas. At the same moment, a child's laughter rang out from behind him, soft, as if muffled by thick walls. Through this laughter, a voice rang out. "You're not leaving here, are you? You will never leave." Eric shuddered, but trying not to show fear, he peered at the girl's face in the portrait. Her doll, he noticed, was holding a small key in her hands. His hand involuntarily reached out to this place, and to his surprise, he felt a cool metal object under his fingers. It was a real key sticking out of the canvas, as if it literally grew out of the painting. The key turned out to be old, with a worn bronze surface and small numbers, 7 inches and 13 inches on its head. Eric turned the key, and suddenly there was a crash from the wall. The secret door, hidden behind the wallpaper-covered boards, slowly opened. He stepped inside, finding himself in a long, narrow corridor lit by a faint, flickering light. The walls of the corridor were covered with strange markings, as if they had been left by claws or nails scratching in agony. There were numbers on each wall, the same ones on the key, 713, repeated over and over again. Eric walked forward, feeling the darkness around him getting heavier, pressing down on him like a living being. With every step he took, he could hear whispers behind him, as if someone was following him. But every time he turned around, he saw only emptiness. Another door loomed ahead. His heart was pounding like a hammer, and his legs felt like lead. Eric knew that something important was hiding behind that door, something that could either give him an answer or bury him here forever. He pushed open the door, finding himself in the most spacious room of the house. Its walls were covered with massive shelves on which children's toys were neatly arranged. Dolls with empty eyes, rusty cars, teddy bears with torn seams. They stood on the shelves, silently watching Eric. Eric felt his consciousness begin to crumble under the onslaught of terror. The sense of time has disappeared. Whether it was a minute, an hour, or even a day, he didn't know. Suddenly, the silence was broken by the creaking of the door leading to the basement, and he realized that he had no other way left but to go down there. He went down for a long time. The stairs creaked under his feet, and the darkness became thicker and thicker, as if it absorbed the light itself. Halfway there, Eric felt a faint whiff of cool air, as if someone had passed by him, leaving a slight smell of decay and damp earth. In the basement, he found a huge mirror standing in the middle of the room. Its surface was covered with dirt, but in the reflection of the dim light, Eric saw something incredible. The reflection showed not him, but a dark silhouette slowly stretching out of the mirror. With horror, he realized that this creature was someone who had once been human, but now became a shadow, forever locked in this house. Eric stepped back, but his foot hit something hard. He looked down and saw an old diary left by someone on the floor. Opening it, he read the latest entries. "This house is a prison for souls. Those who die here stay forever, losing themselves every year. My family was cursed, and now everyone who crosses the threshold becomes a part of this house. He breathes our fears, feeds on our lives. It is impossible to leave here, because we are the house." Eric recoiled, feeling the walls around him begin to shrink, as if the house itself was trying to swallow him up. He rushed to the exit, ran up the stairs, trying again and again to get to the door, but the corridors twisted and distorted, making every step meaningless. Suddenly he realized a terrible truth. He became a new prisoner of the house, a new shadow among the walls. The house has gained another soul. A few days later, a new group of journalists arrived in Lakeston after hearing about Eric's strange disappearance. They asked questions, questioned the locals, but no one could explain what had happened. The house stood empty and gloomy as always. Its windows remained dark and lifeless. But one night, one of the local children passing by the house swore that he saw a barely noticeable face in the window, looking out from the depths of the dark glasses. His eyes were empty, as if he was looking at them from a distant, inaccessible world, as if asking for help. It was Eric's face. Thus ended the story of Eric's disappearance, but the curse of the house remained, ready to accept those who dare to enter it.